Hi, this is Lauren Zimmerman. I'm with the Writer's Block Bookstore located in Winter Park, and I'm actually sitting in the beautiful Writer's Block Bookstore recording studio in Winter Park in the brand new Winter Park Library. And with me here is Elaine Clark, who is an avid reader and also a member of the Board of Trustees for the library. And we're really excited to have her here just to talk about books and her blog and all those wonderful things that we love to talk about, books and independent bookstores themselves. So Elaine's blog is called Elaineous, and I'm going to put Elaine on the spot literally. She just walked in, has no idea what I was doing, and so literally I'm going to put her on the spot and ask her to tell us a little bit about her blog.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much. And it is definitely on the spot to sit here and talk about my blog. But I have been brainstorming for a few years, and a dear friend of mine encouraged me to just start putting something on paper or a computer. And so a year ago, I started writing small posts to family and friends about books that I love, places that I visited that have really cool bookstores, and that sort of morphed into talking about literary events and happenings in our community.
That's great. I am so excited about the blog, and I was so excited when I found out about it because I knew about the recording studio, and I knew that I wanted to start doing a podcast and recordings about books and events and about what's going on in our community. Winter Park is known as an arts and culture community, and literature is one of the arts, and so that's where I am focused on. And we don't talk about literature enough, in my opinion. I think when we talk about the arts, we think of music and theaters and plays, but we kind of leave the literature out. So it's important to talk about books and why we love books and who loves books and bookstores and libraries and all the fun ways that you can feel in touch and enjoy a book. So Elaine, a little bit ago, you had said to me that you'd want to, get some information, and you had a beautiful question, and unfortunately we didn't record it, so I'm going to ask you to repeat it, and I'll give you answers in reference to bookstores. You were saying earlier
Yes.
that you were noticing that bookstores are becoming unique in the pandemic and
Yes.
and all that. So it was beautifully said. I'd love to. Sometimes it's hard to repeat something we've said beautifully, but we're going to try again.
Well, I have noticed and read a lot in the press about independent bookstores having a resurgence since the pandemic. I think that they served a great purpose to the community during a time when public libraries were closed. And what I've always thought unique about bookstores in different cities is the niche that they fill. Some are quirky, some are about mysteries, and each of them has their own personality. I think what is unique about Writer's Block is that it acts as an extension of our great library here in Winter Park. And we're also fortunate to have this new beautiful facility to come and visit. But in addition to that, we have this beautiful bookstore just down the street that meets the needs of every single person in our community. And I was curious as I was reading about this to find out how the store has I guess morphed since the pandemic here for you.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really great question. It was up and down. All of us, the whole world came to a stop. What was interesting was people started asking for puzzles in the beginning, and books for their children and things like that. And all of a sudden, our web business just increased exponentially. People started going onto our website, which is fantastic because we're trying to drive people to our website rather than using the famous, whose name will not be mentioned. And so they became more accustomed to coming to the local bookstore to get books rather than ordering them online. And then it just introduced us to the community. What was really fun was, and you were talking about the uniqueness of bookstores, is that every bookstore is definitely unique. And I've always believed, when I even open the book, that the bookstore has to have me as the owner all over it. I tell that to my staff all the time, that my words and and how I curate and the customers that come into the store, they have to come in and feel like they know me. They have to, when they ask, who selects the books on the shelves, it's Lauren. Who selects the gifts, Lauren. And so, not because I feel like Lauren is special, but I agree with you that every bookstore is unique, and that it's important that our voice, that the owner's voice, is always there and always available to the community, so that they feel like they're part of the bookstore. They feel like they know the bookstore, they know the staff, they enjoy it, they know what to expect. And it's interesting because we opened up a bookstore in Winter Garden during the pandemic. And Winter Garden is a slightly different community than Winter Park. It's very similar. They have the downtown shopping and all of that, but it's more of a lot more families, a lot more transient and people that are coming in because of the growth in West Orlando. So trying to learn about my customer in Winter Garden and learn about my customer in Winter Park has been really fascinating, to try to get to know them. But assuming that we do know our stores and people come in and they know what to expect, the pandemic just brought more and more people to the store. I'm not sure if after the pandemic is over, if people are going to go back to their old habits. There's a void, like a lapse in between the pandemic and now that we're dealing with, and that's bringing back events and bringing people back in the store and doing marketing and trying to get all the people back that ordered books from us during pandemic, because that has dropped off. I'm assuming they're going back to ordering from whose name will not be mentioned. But it's been the pandemic did elevate us to the next level for sure. I'm proud of the fact that during the pandemic that I was able to keep it open most of the time and to keep my staff on payroll. I'm really proud of that. There was a lot of bookstores that shut down during the pandemic, and the employees, got on, government unemployment and all those extra benefits that people needed in order to survive during the pandemic. And none of my staff had to do that. They were with me the whole time. And I didn't even look to see if I was making money or not making money. It was just something that I decided was important to me to keep them employed. I used to joke that I used to joke while it was happening that maybe I would make more money if I just had shut down. Because it was just total chaos. If you had gone in our store in the beginning and we shut off half the store and we were receiving books and the publishers were a mess and they were shut down and we didn't know what they had and what they didn't have, and it was just when you walked in there you just saw boxes of books, and I wish we had taken more pictures because it was kind of we could put it into the history books of the pandemic, because every 100 years we have a pandemic, and so. But does that answer your question the long way?
Well, that description, recently there was a documentary on, I don't know what streaming channel, but about a gentleman who had a bookstore, I think in Vermont or Maine or someplace. I don't know if you've seen it, but exactly as you described is what was happening to him. He, a single owner, it was a very small town, and people were walking up to his window asking if he was open, and of course he was very cautious. He was an older gentleman, and people could not come into the store, but he would hand them the books outside their window, and the inside of his store was filled with deliveries, and of course the only people allowed in and out were the people dropping off their books. But what stuck with me in that documentary was that this was his lifeblood. His daily routine was, and it was the lifeblood of the people in the community. They were so grateful to have this one place where there was some form of interaction beyond what they had, in their home, their closed doors, and it kept the reading world and the world of literature open to them.
Yeah.
So it is kind of an amazing thing, and I think it made everybody in the book business appreciate what you have to offer.
Yeah, I used to joke. They never said that bookstores were essential. So we were never. Although I argued that we were, I kept saying we're essential. I mean, these people, they need books, and where are they going to get them? And so we behaved like it was essential. It's fortunate that bookstores, that I own a bookstore. If I had owned any other retail, I would not be in this position. It was just a wonderful coincidence that I just happened to open a bookstore. But I have a funny story about the pandemic. I think all I think all owners have their own little funny story. So in the beginning, we delivered. And if you had a 32789 or 51 or 92 zip code, we would drive and bring the books to people's houses within like a 3 or 4 mile radius. Not even that. And I was the delivery person. So every day I'd come in and they'd have this box for me with the addresses, and I would go around Winter Park and, oh, what a beautiful area here. And I'm looking around going, wow, this is really nice. And so I'm walking up to doors and people are passing me and they're going, Lauren, what are you doing? And I'm going, I ran it. A couple people recognized me and I go, I'm delivering books. It's like, so the owner's delivering books. And, I think it was kind of fun to do that during the pandemic. It was very, if you talk about the macro and the micro of it, the macro was the pandemic and all that, and then the micro was me getting in my car at 3 o'clock every day and delivering books in Winter Park. So that was kind of fun to do that.
Well, I guess it speaks to that sense of community, that we all we don't realize we need until until it's taken away from us. And I feel like that's what when the library was going through the transition, it was kind of, it was there, but it wasn't there, and we all really missed it. And now when you walk back into the library and you see the activity, you think you really, it's kind of a joyful experience. You appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like that's when you walk down Park Avenue and you walk by your bookstore, you know that when you walk inside and you start to have a conversation with the person behind the counter, they're going to ask you, oh, well, do you like that book? Or I read this book. And I've heard conversations like that happening between the people who work at your place with people who are buying books. And sometimes they're 5 or 10 minute conversations about
books.
A series of books that they might read based on the book this person is buying. And it's a really fantastic transaction.
Oh, yeah. The days when I can wait on customers and talk books for 10 minutes is like the funnest part of my day. It's like you can, like today is National Book Lovers Day, by the way. And somebody sent an email and asked a bunch of questions about the bookstore and why I own the bookstore. And, and the main thing was the sense of community, the charm and and you come in and you leave all your politics and your opinions, outside, and you come in and you can talk about books and with anybody. And what I love about books is, and it's available. It's shocking how much it's not available, but if you think about it, it's a book. It's like $5 or $20 or a used book or library book or whatever. But it's not an expensive adventure for anybody. And I think it's also the road to learning for a lot of people. And it's also a form of enjoyment where you can, read about other people's lives or read about foreign places or, read stories, about the past or fantasy, and all of it is just a book. And it's not that expensive. And it's just a place where people can come in and they can walk there and pull up a fantasy book, and I could be standing right next to them and we're talking about the book. And, for all I know that, our politics are opposite and I have no idea, and I have a new friend and they walk out the door. And, it's really, really special that bookstores have. I don't know of any other business, or I could probably say that about libraries, but I don't know any other environment. That where you can have those kind of interactions. There's the whole third place concept of, coffee shops, churches, and books being your third place. But I think the books or bookstores and libraries are at the top of the third place, because if you talk about churches and cafes, they're wonderful too, but they're not. There's no real interaction in terms of real learning and reading, and especially for children. And so I think that's very special, and I am very lucky to be able to provide that service to the community.
Well, something that I'm working on for the first blog after a nice little summer break is I reached out to a lot of my readers and asked them to talk to me or send me their favorite summer reads, because of course everybody talks about summer reading,
right.
And I figure for those of us who didn't get a lot of summer reading in, it would be nice to add new books to our queue, right? And so it's been really fun to get recommendations back from people. But what I also find really interesting and what I sort of researched over the summer are looking into reading blogs
Uh-huh.
that talk about their favorite books, like
Uh-huh.
the New York Times
Yes. Yes.
blog
Yes.
post.
Yes.
And so I had reached out to you earlier in the
Yeah.
summer to get your list of the places that you seek to find out interesting books. I think what has been fun about coming into the library is seeing how they showcase all of their books, and they've got the bestsellers. The, everything's kind of arranged in sort of a bookstore kind of way. And so before people walk into the library or your bookstore, it would be nice for them to have kind of an idea of what they're looking for. And many times, at least through the interaction with my readers, I have a list of about 5 books now that I am interested in. And so I thought it would be nice to add an additional reference to blogs that people can go to hear people talk about books.
Yeah, well, there are many, many blogs about books, and and podcasts and things like that. There's a couple of websites that are fantastic that you actually have to join for a nominal fee that gives all the list of reviews and new books that are coming out, and a lot of these websites, they'll actually interview the author because they've been around a really long time and they're successful in talking about new releases. And then there's the actual podcasts. There's like the New York Times that you mentioned, and there's just so many more that I listen to. If you look at my phone, there's probably a dozen of them on my phone. And so when I'm driving, I listen to them sometimes. And people are talking about books. I listen to, NPR religiously, and to find out, what books are coming out right now that they're actually talking about. We get a lot of suggestions from the from the publishers about new releases, and that such and such is going to be on the Today Show, so we learn things in advance. It's a real interesting, it is a science picking out new releases, and it's even a bigger science, which is something brand new that's happening right now in the world. And I think it was because of TikTok, actually, that there's a resurgence of older books that have been around for a long time. We're probably seeing that in the library as well. People are coming in and probably asking for other books, not new releases, because all of a sudden it's on TikTok and everybody wants to read it. So that's pretty exciting.
So what's the title on TikTok that
It's called Book Talk. It's a hashtag.
Okay.
I'm not good. My staff, I go to the old-fashioned stuff. The TikTok, I'm just now on the beginning of a learning curve with that, going to it, and because like Instagram has Bookstagram, and they have all these other hashtags that you can use, and so you look for the hashtags, and it's really interesting what people are doing on TikTok. It's crazy. We have this one author, Colleen Hoover, who's been around a long time. And she, for some reason, it really took off, and we sold over 200 of their books. I'm sure they're being checked out all the time here. And it was all, people found out about her backlist. It wasn't her new stuff. It was finding all of her old books, and so that's pretty exciting. There's a few of those.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Especially considering that demographic is a much younger demographic.
Yeah.
And so it introduces them to a whole genre of books
Yeah.
that they would have never ever
Yeah.
considered.
Yeah.
So besides the New York Times podcast and TikTok, hashtag Book Talk, what else do you love?
For podcasts? Yeah. So what I'm doing actually right now is I'm pulling, for those of you that cannot see this, I'm pulling up on my phone all of the podcasts that I listen to. Okay, so What Should I Read Next with Ann Bogle, all the book that's from Book Riot, and Book Riot has a great website too, Book Talk, etc. There's Fully Booked, and that's the podcast for Kirkus Review, if anybody's familiar with Kirkus Review, which is the leader in the industry of reviewing both published and self-published books. NPR Book of the Day, Currently Reading podcast. There's another Book Riot podcast. There's the Book Review. There's the Future Construct. There's the New Yorker fiction. There's I just have so much respect for, The Literary Life with Mitch Kaplan, who's the owner of Books and Books. There's a friend of ours, our local author, we're so proud of, Friends in Fiction. Kristen Harmel is in that group, and she's become a New York Times best-selling author during during COVID. Reading, I'm not kidding, right? Should stop taking notes. Reading glasses, Get Booked, The Stacks, Sarah's Bookshelf Live, the Literary Life podcast. Should I go on? The novel pairing. There's just so many of them out there, and it's so cool that maybe there's a whole resurgence of just reading and listening to people talk about books.
For all of our listeners, I'm going to put that on my blog, so you don't have to write all that down.
Right. Yeah, I'll give her my phone, and then she can write it all down.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
One thing that so tell me about the Literary Life. Tell me about books. Yeah, from Books and Books. Books and Books in Miami, right?
Yes. So Books and Books is a bookstore in Miami. Mitch is the owner. He's, I guess it's been close to 30 years. I'm not sure the exact number, but he's started out as a college age or whatever, and he's still there. And the book, and so he started this podcast probably about 3 or 4 years ago. It was before the pandemic. And he's been able to, he interviews authors most of the time. He doesn't really talk about specific books. He'll interview one specific author. And so, there's a lot of others that have podcasts too, other bookstores that I didn't list. Like if you were to go to any indie bookstore, some of them already have blogs and podcasts, and you can just click on there. So, but that's a particularly good one because he's so lucky that he's been in the industry for so long and that he's able to interview as many authors as he wants. And so that's pretty exciting that he can do that. Something we can strive for.
Yeah, that's exciting. Another thing that struck me when you were talking is, can you tell our audience about the Kirkus Review?
Oh, okay.
Because you look at the New York Times reviews. I look at Wall Street Journal. I look at the Guardian, and I have pulled up Kirkus reviews, and I'm just curious to know more about it.
Yeah, there's two that I really, actually three, that I really rely on. When people come to the store, I tell them the one thing I do not do is I do not rely on the New York Times bestselling list. I ignore the New York Times bestselling list. I know that authors want to be on it, and it's exciting. We worked with, like Kristen, I felt like we were a part of her mission to become a best-selling author during the pandemic. Amazon was not selling her book, and so to get on the New York Times during pandemic was amazing. But that's not really what we look at. So Kirkus Review is a magazine that it's expensive. It comes out every month, and they review books. People submit books to authors submit them to Kirkus Review, and they most of the time they reject them, but if they were willing to publish a review, it's pretty exciting. If it gets a star review, that's even more exciting because then they write a full-blown review of that book. So when I go on Kirkus Review, I'm looking for the star reviews. And so I read the reviews because I don't get a chance to read all the books. So when someone comes in the store, it's like, can you give me a recommendation? And I'll say, well, I haven't read the book, but I've read the reviews. And then there's another one, Publishers Weekly, and that's a trade magazine that's the same as Kirkus, where people will send in books to be reviewed. They're more, Kirkus adheres, they're more independent, and they do reviews for self-published and for a lot of different books. Publishers Weekly is more mainstream and works mostly with the publishers directly, and so you don't see a whole lot of self-published reviews of self-published. And then there's the book page, which is great, and the libraries, that's kind of something libraries use a lot, that they rely on to help them choose, and there's some great articles. If all I did was look at Publishers Weekly, Kirkus Review, and Book Page every month, I would know what's going on in the industry right there and then. That's it. There's a couple of other websites. Book Browser is really good. That's the one where I paid monthly to be able to get in there and see more. You can make comments on them if you're a member. Publishers Weekly is great. Book Page is probably the cheapest of the three subscriptions that you can get.
And those are open to
everyone.
everyone.
It's just like if you had a subscription to Time Magazine.
Okay.
But they're more expensive than, when I say expensive, I mean, in the hundreds. But it's something that's for the trade, and it's important, and because that's where we go to find, because they review the books about 6 weeks out, so that we know that we make sure that the books are on our shelves.
before they hit the shelves.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you want to, the book page doesn't do that. Book page is like at the moment, it's that month, like the month of August will tell you what's coming out in August. But Publishers Weekly and Kirkus will tell you what's coming out like 2 months from now or 6 weeks from now. So.
Well, I don't know how you keep up with all of it, and I will attest to having seen the bookshelves in your house that are filled to the brim, and your desk that is filled to the brim with books.
Yeah.
And there are so many to read, and so little time to read them.
I know. It's a bookseller. It's like I don't get to read as much. I'm the shoemaker that has no shoes, But it's great, and I and I like when I can sit down and read a book and finish it and love it. That brings a lot of joy to me, and because all of a sudden I've decided that I'm crazy about this author, and I will do everything I can to help promote and sell the book. And my energy and my enthusiasm in that book when I did read it. Maybe for the next podcast we can talk about an experience I had with a book that it was a debut author, and I read it before it came out, and I just went crazy over this book, and it ended up being like #1, and and everybody fell in love with it at such a young age. Reed, forgot her first name, but I'll talk about that book because I got to talk to her on the phone and everything. I mean, it was really cool. So when stuff like that happens, I get excited.
So you hear about that? The library here is about new books through what was the
they book page. They have their own resources. They probably use Publishers Weekly too, because there's a whole section for librarians.
Do you coordinate at all with? Do you interface with the library at all when you're ordering your books, or it's completely separate?
Totally different. Yeah, they probably rely on the New York Times more than I do, because somebody's buying those books. We put James Patterson on our shelves and nobody buys them. They come here and they borrow them. Same's true for romance. Is that way? People would rather borrow than buy. So you kind of notice, where. I guess you get to know where the reader is going. Are they going to the library? Are they getting their Kindle? Like, how are they getting their books? But when something hits the New York Times bestselling list, chances are they went to a library, or they bought it off of Barnes and Noble or Amazon. When they come into the store, they want to see something different than they see at Barnes and Noble and on Amazon. They want to see that debut author that I read that I was crazy about, and I didn't single-handedly help her be #1. I'd like to think that I did, but if you combine all the indie bookstores together and how they all went, excited about it, because it created buzz within the community. We also communicate with each other. That's one thing I left out. The trade itself, the booksellers communicate with one another. There's programs, and there's a lot of that's kind of complicated too. We should put that down for a future talk on how bookstores communicate with each other about books that are coming out. I rely on that more than I rely on. I rely on reviews by booksellers more than I rely on reviews from New York Times.
Well, I think what I kind of take away from this conversation is that walking into a bookstore isn't just about going in and necessarily picking out the bestseller book that you see on New York Times, but sort of having the opportunity to kind of roam and think, and if something grabs you, you have a personal friend in that bookstore that can help you and guide you and help you pick out that book, and having that there's a myriad of resources available to find out about new books, and we need to be just joyful that we have that opportunity to find out about all those different things and read in all different genres. Yeah,
it's exciting. And people ask me all the time about the bookstore, and I look at them and I go, "It's an industry. It's controlled. It's you've got you've got publishers, you've got authors, you've got publicists, you've got marketing, you've got agents, you've got bookstores, you've got Amazon. It's an industry." So anyway, I think that probably this is a good time to stop. This was just such a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it, and I put Elaine on the spot, and you were just such a good sport about this. And I'm looking forward to continuing our conversations and creating a really fun podcast.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.